जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदनंदन व्रज रंजन यामुनतीरावनचारि जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदनंदन व्रजरंजन श्यामनतीरावनचारि जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी हरे कृष्णा कृष्णा कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय जय प्रभुपादा प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद नाम संकीर्तन महायज्ञ की जय श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान् सहगण ललिता शिव शाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna. Welcome everybody to this Saturday evening Bhagavad Gita Satsang program. Hope everybody had a good week. So anybody recollects what we discussed last week? I request all of you to please keep your pen, paper, whatever your digital, some way for you to take notes so you can, otherwise, our memory is so fleeting that week after week we might just forget what we discussed last week. Okay, so we discussed chapters 1 through chapter 1, verses 1 through 13. We also discussed that, we should read Bhagavad Gita very scrutinizingly with the help of a devotee of Lord, Srila Prabhupada, who is helping us understand Bhagavad Gita. And then the first few verses, it just, we discussed about how importance of Dharmakshetra as a place, and how Sanjaya was, by the grace of his guru, he was able to, okay, there's too much of sun. One second. Sorry about that. So by the grace of his guru, he was able to, sit in the palace itself, and he is narrating all the, whatever is happening on the battlefield. And then, next few verses, actually, Duryodhana's fear comes through when he looks at the armies of Pandavas. He had not expected them to put together so many Akshohinis, as they call them, and so he was very suddenly concerned, and he goes and talks to Dronacharya. Then we discussed about how he is trying to point out finger at a possible mistake that his guru Dronacharya had done. And we discussed how even today generally there is no respect for teachers, for guru, irrespective whether it is spiritual knowledge or material knowledge, school, college, or maybe some music or anything else that we might be learning. Right, so it's very important, because otherwise normally we don't, the benefit of the knowledge doesn't come to us if you don't respect the person from whom we are getting the knowledge. And also then discuss briefly about how Drupada got his son Drishtadyumna and Draupadi from a fire sacrifice. And Drishtadyumna was, he was meant to kill Dronacharya. And even though Dronacharya knew about it, he was very benevolent, and he accepted Drishtadyumna as his disciple and taught him all the skills of warfare, knowing very well that he's going to possibly kill him in the future. This shows, the great selfless quality of Brahmanas, who were teachers, and who used to always uphold dharma without worrying about inconveniences or what things that it's going to bring to them, as long as they stick to the path of dharma. And then there was various discussion about various fighters whose names Duryodhana calls out. Yeah, and some of his diplomacy that he was demonstrating on the battlefield. So we're going to continue now from verse 14, unless anybody has any questions that we want to address. We need to address now. Otherwise, we'll start with verse 14. Okay. ततश्वेतैर्हयैर्युक्ते महती स्यन्दने स्थितौ माधवः पाण्डवश्चैव दिव्यौ शङ्खौ प्रदत्मतुः. On the other side, both Lord Krishna and Arjuna, stationed on a great chariot drawn by white horses, sounded their transcendental conch shells. So, like I said, last time when there's a battle, generally, unlike, today's setup where people just, are sitting in the comforts of their rooms and sending missiles, firing missiles, wars used to be fought on a very different, way. The way the wars were fought were very different. Obviously, it used to be physical in front of each other, and there's a lot of etiquette which was being followed. Before a battle starts, both armies, indicate the beginning start of the battle by blowing conch shell. Now here, previous verse, actually, there is discussion about how Bhishma blew his conch shell, but there is no mention about this word transcendental. So here, Divya, so the word says Divyau Shankau, right? So Divyau means transcendental. How do you define transcendental? Transcendental is anything which is not connected to this material world. So we understand material world in this whole creation of the Lord, 1/4 is the material world and 3/4 is the spiritual world. Okay, so let me talk about this. We have not talked about this before. Lord's creation, 3/4 is called Vaikuntha Loka or spiritual world. And there are innumerable universes in the spiritual world as well. And then in the 1/4, which is the Lord's creation, which is called material world, again, we know of only one universe, right? And we talk about if you look at modern science, etc., they call Milky Way, and and they talk about many stars and sun and moon and all that, but they don't know anything beyond this one universe. But actually, as per Shastra, it says, this is just one universe. It's almost like a speck, of bag of mustard seeds, one seed. That is the universe our universe can be considered one of those seeds, and then there are innumerable other universes which are in the material sphere itself, which is just 1/4 of the Lord's creation. Why this material world? In a city, the jail, there is jail, right? Now, what is the jail meant for? Jail is meant for reformation. Who are the people who are sent to the jail? People who have broken the rules of the government, right, are sent to the jail so that they can be reformed, with the intention that they don't again do something that will bring them back to the jail, right? So to keep them out of the jail, to be more well-behaved citizen, etc., etc., right? And so jail is a place for punishment, right? Now similarly, this material world, it's called Durga, right? Actually, Durga also is the name of the goddess who's actually responsible. She's the one who's in charge of this material world. And in Hindi, you might know the word Durga. Durga means fort, right? So this is a fort, and material world is actually likened to a jail. Now the interesting part in this material world, is that there are no bars, right? There are no visible bars like you would find in a jail, and necessarily there are no very similar uniforms, right? Like if you go to jail and you say, okay, all inmates of one category have a particular uniform, then there might be an ordinary category, then special category, then VIP category, people who are in jail but who live in an AC room, for example, right? Or somebody who might be allowed to be in their own civil dress, for example, right? Now these are all different grades. Now just imagine one conversation happening, right? Two jailers, one from class 1 and one from class 3, and they're discussing, saying that, hey, you know what, you are living in one third class room, right? It's so small, dingy, smelly, and no light, and you're wearing this lousy uniform. Look at me. I'm living in this big, big room, and it has AC, and they serve me food in a dish. And yeah, how does this conversation sound? um, I mean, both of them are in jail, right? But one person is just claiming to be in a better position than the other person, right? And kind of, showing off his better position. But it doesn't make any sense because both of them are in jail. What is the use of this conversation, right? So similarly, this material world is actually compared to this jail where we are all here for reformation. Okay, so we will talk about this as we progress in Bhagavad Gita, right? But the idea is that even here in the material world, it's not a jail as we know it, no, right, generally, but it's a beautiful jail from which we don't want to get out, you know and it's very opposite to the actual jail in the material world where prisoners want to get out of the jail, right? But this jail, the Lord has designed it so beautifully that we don't want to get out, right? We feel at home, uh, right? It's such a beautiful jail. So Durga Devi is in charge of this whole material world, right? So whatever is outside this material world, so not beyond this, what we call as material realm, right? Which means all these material planets. Now leave this 1/4 of the Lord's creation. Everything that is 3/4 is called Divya, right? Is called transcendental, right? And this is the knowledge that is not available to modern scientists and other people, right? Which is available only in the Shastra, um, right? And somebody might ask again the same famous question: how do I believe it? Right? And it's like so many other things that we have learned and studied in school and colleges, which we never know. We don't know if it is true or not, and we just believed it. So we trust authority, right? So that is why we have to trust Shastra, which is the supreme authority, right? Which has come down, and we talked about this also, right? Like Shastra means it is not created by any human being. It has come down from the Lord through various, very significant individuals who form various paramparas, right, or disciplic successions. And any transcendental knowledge specifically about the Lord Vishnu or Krishna authentically comes only in 4 paramparas, right? One is starting from Brahma, then Shri or Lakshmi, then Kumaras, 4 Kumaras, and Lord Shiva, right? So here, this is called Divyau Shankau. So these conch shells which are being blown by Krishna and Arjuna are considered as not belonging to this material world, right? And in the purport, actually, Prabhupada makes a beautiful statement. He says, the sounding of the transcendental conch shells indicated that there was no hope of victory for the other side because Krishna was on the side of the Pandavas. Actually, see, if you see in this whole analysis of Duryodhana's, right, previously about the strength, comparative strength of both the parties, etc., he's talking about Bhima, Bhishma, and so many other fighters on both sides. But he did never spoke about Krishna, right? Because according to him, Krishna was just a charioteer. Now, what is the point in discussing about a charioteer? He's not going to pick a weapon, right? Because that was the vow that Krishna had taken. Actually, what happens before the war? Both both Arjuna and Duryodhan once come to meet Krishna, right, to seek his support for the battle, right? And Krishna is sleeping, and Duryodhana has come and is standing near the head of Krishna, saying, "I'm superior." Arjuna is sitting at the near the foot of Lord Krishna, saying, "I'm your servant. This is my position." Then after some time, Lord Krishna wakes up and then he opens his eyes and then he sees, "Oh, what is this? Arjuna and Duryodhana, both of you are here. Something special must be happening." Obviously, he knows everything, but then he asks, "Okay, what is the reason why you are here?" And then both of them say, "Okay, we are here to seek your support, help for the battle." And then Krishna says, "Okay, Arjuna, you are the younger one. So you first ask, what is it that you are looking for?" And then before that, Krishna gives options, 2 options, right? So he says, one, I'm going to be there on one side, but I'm not going to lift a weapon, right? I'm just going to be there available with you. And then on the other side is my Narayana army, which is the Yadu army, which is super powerful, right? Extremely powerful army. And so one will get me, the other will get my army. So Arjuna, yours is the first right of first refusal. Now you tell me, what is it that you choose amongst these two, between these two, right? And then Arjuna so happily, he just says, "Krishna, what else do I want? I just want you." I want you to be on my side. And Krishna, just to prove the point, he says, are you sure? I'm not going to be fighting. I'm not going to lift a weapon. What is the use of me being in the fight if I'm not going to lift a weapon? Arjuna says, no problem. I just want you, Krishna, to be on my side. And then Duryodhana is like, he's happy in, he's like jumping up and down, saying that what is this? Arjuna got the first chance. He could have just taken that Narayana army. Brainless fellow. He doesn't understand what is the power that army can bring. We'll succeed by just having this army. So he was going on in his, in his thought process. And then when he was asked, he says, oh yeah, I will be happy to take your Narayana army. Right? So like this, in Duryodhana's mind, Krishna was a nobody. Actually, Srila Prabhupada says that Duryodhana's, all his soldiers were like zeros, right? Like now you can have hundreds of zeros, right? Now all those zeros have absolutely no value if there is no one preceding them, right? So you can have 100 zeros, which will all be zero if there is no one before them, right? So Krishna is like this one. He is the Supreme Lord. He is like that one, and Duryodhana didn't consider that one at all. He was only happy, discussing and analyzing all those zeros that he had. So Prabhupada is saying here that there is no hope for victory for the other side. Why? Because Krishna was on the side of the Pandavas. See, this is very important, right? So we should always, so Prabhupada makes a beautiful, from Shastra, he says, Jayastu Pandu Putranam Yesham Pakshe Janardanaha. Jayastu Pandu Putranam, right? So people like Pandus are going to be victorious. Why? Because Yesham Pakshe Janardana, in whose side Janardana or Krishna is there. Right? So this is very important. All of us actually should want to be on the side of Krishna. We should not prepare to be on the side of Duryodhana, because like, in the previous verse, it was already predicted. Duryodhana says all these people are going to be anyway, they're going to give up their lives in the future, right? So dharma, people who are on the side of dharma or Krishna, right, or who is the creator of dharma, they will be protected. They will be given all good advice and direction, and everything will be given to them. For what? For getting out of this material world, right? And those people who are on the other side, and we will discuss all these in the following chapters. I'm just, kind of setting the context here because some new words have been, introduced here, right? So, and for people who are on the other side, they're going to just go down and down and down. They're going to just degrade in this material life, right? And of course, then we can argue or try to understand, saying that what is this, why material, why not material world, why outside material world, what about success in the material world, right? We'll discuss about all those things as we go along. Right? Victory is always with persons like the sons of Pandava, because Lord Krishna is associated with them. Now, another interesting point Prabhupada is making here, and wherever the Lord is present, goddess of fortune is also there. Now, in this material world, everybody is behind money. Everybody is behind money. Money is honey. Money means honey, money is honey, whatever you want to call it, right? Everybody is behind money, and money is given by Lakshmi Devi, who is the wife of Lord Narayana, Vaikuntha, right? Now, just try to understand this, okay? Now, people who worship only Lakshmi, but who don't worship Narayana, how can we understand that? It's like Lakshmi is Narayana's wife, right? It's like I am trying to take favor from somebody else's wife without actually even taking permission from her husband, right? It is considered as the most degraded, form of relationship in this material world, right? Establishing a relationship with somebody else's wife without, or trying to build some kind of contact with somebody else's wife without the consent of the husband. So it's similarly, Lakshmi Devi, actually she is always in Vaikuntha, she's always serving the lotus feet of Narayana, right? So she is not very happy to give her blessings to somebody who doesn't worship her husband, but only comes to her for material fortune, right? But those devotees who worship Narayana, automatically Narayana or Krishna or Vishnu, automatically Lakshmi Devi is with him, with that devotee, right? Why? Because Lakshmi is always serving the lotus feet of Narayana, right? So we should not try to acquire Lakshmi. We should not try to acquire money only, and not worship Narayana. Narayana and Lakshmi have to be worshipped together. There are a lot of, like I know of many people who do this only Lakshmi Puja. Actually, Lakshmi, is not very happy being worshipped alone. So we should understand that. And when we worship Vishnu or Krishna or Narayana, then Lakshmi automatically favors that devotee. Okay, besides that, the chariot on which both the friends. So here there is a description about station on the great chariot drawn by white horses. Shvetair hayer yukte. Mahati Syandane stitav. Syandane means chariot. Right, so this chariot was given to Arjuna by Agni. So there's also a beautiful story there from Mahabharata. So in this first chapter, we'll see some stories from Mahabharata. After that, it becomes hardcore philosophy. So what happens once actually there is Agni, the fire god, right? Now, what Agni does, so we should understand this. Every name we call like Agni, he's a person, right? Agni is a person. And when we do yagna, right, we do sacrifice, fire sacrifice, we put, some the ghee into the fire. Now, actually, Agni Dev, as the fire god, has to accept that offering. That is the whole idea, that we are trying to, this is called Karma Kanda. Okay, in Veda, there are three parts. There is Karma Kanda, Gnana Kanda, Upasana Kanda. In Karma Kanda, what you do is you do various sacrifices. You try to please these different demigods, right? And Agni is one of those demigods. And when you offer anything in that sacrifice, in that puja, whatever you're doing, that particular demigod has to accept it. Only then whatever puja that person is doing becomes successful. So once what happens, Agni Dev, there is some puja which is happening, and they so in all these sacrifices, there's always very clear guidance of how much, what, etc., etc. Very detailed, procedures are given. Once what happens, somebody does sacrifice and there is too much of ghee offered to Agni Dev. No, Agni Dev has to accept. He accepted, and now he has stomach problem. Too much of ghee. Then he goes to Brahma and he says, "Oh, too much of ghee, Brahma. What should I do?" He says, "Okay, go to this Khandava forest. This Khandava forest, there are a lot of herbs, right? So if you consume Khandava forest, then all your stomach indigestion will go off." So then Agni goes to Khandava forest to consume, which means that he is going to burn the forest. Now in that forest there was a serpent by name Takshaka. Now he was a friend of Indradev. Takshaka was a friend of Indradev. Now Indradev is the lord of rain. So what used to happen, every time Agni used to come and to consume Khandava forest, Indradev used to, pour rain, and then the fire was getting extinguished. So this is going on. So now Agni is suffering because of indigestion. So once Arjuna and Krishna actually come near Khandava forest for some other reason, and then Agni goes, disguised as a Brahmana, and he goes and asks these two Kshatriyas, saying that, "Can you please help me?" And because he had come as a Brahmana, Krishna and Arjuna says, "Okay, whatever you require, we will do." Then Agni tells, "Okay, see, I have to consume this forest, but this Indra is pouring rain. Please help me." So then what happens? Arjuna actually what he does is he builds a kind of shelter, right? A roof just of arrows, right? Arrows placed in such a way that not even a drop of water could actually fall down, right? So he builds such a beautiful, protection, and then Agni burns Khandava, and then Indradev tries to pour water, but nothing happens. Right? Then there is a demon called Maya Danava. He is saved. Arjuna saves him. Right? Actually, Maya Danava is considered as the technologist amongst the devas. Right? Like he's the all the modern so-called technological advancement are considered to be his babies, right? As in he's the technological brain, right? He's the Asura, right? And he was saved by Arjuna, and then Arjuna gets a favor from him as well. But Agni, who is very pleased by Arjuna, then gives him this chariot. Now, like Agni or fire, like sun can go in all directions. Nobody can prevent the sun, right? Except that if you are sitting inside under a roof, then obviously sun, we are preventing the sun from coming inside, but practically it will come through the pores, everything, right? Nobody can stop the sun from going in any direction. So here Prabhupada says that the chariot was capable of conquering all sides, because it was given by Agni Dev. So it was so powerful that it could conquer all the three worlds. So these were all, various benefits that were there on the side of Arjuna, right? Krishna was there. Then the chariot is there, right? Which is a very powerful chariot that they were sitting on. Now we move on to verse 15. Panchajanyam Rishikesho Deva Dattam Dhananjayah Poundram Dadmo Mahashankam Bhima Karma Vrukodaraha. Lord Krishna blew his conch shell called Panchajanya. Arjuna blew the Devadatta, and Bhima, the voracious eater and performer of Herculean tasks, blew his terrific conch shell called Poundra. Okay, in this, Lord Krishna is referred to as Rishikesha, right? Rishikesha means, the word Rishikesha means master of the senses. Rishika Ishaha. Rishika means senses, right? What are the senses? Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, etc., skin, etc., right? Now these are the senses, and Rishikesha is the master of the senses. Now what is a master of senses means what? Actually, he is the owner of the senses. Now what does that mean? Actually, the senses are supposed to be used in the service of the owner, right? Like for example, if there is a vehicle, the vehicle is available for use by the owner. Now if suppose I say I'm a driver and I say that today I'm going to just take this vehicle on my own. I don't care where the owner wants to go. So owner is sitting in the back seat and he's saying take left, and the driver is taking right. He says go straight, then the driver reverses. Now what does one, I mean, if something like this is happening, what does it say, right? Like the driver is just is just not heeding to the words of the owner, right? So and similarly, when we actually use our senses for our own sense gratification, we call this sense gratification. What does this mean? I am trying to gratify my senses. I'm trying to make the eyes happy, ears happy, mouth happy. How do I make the eyes happy? I make the eyes happy by making sure that I give it things, beautiful things to look at, etc., etc. Ear, beautiful music. Of course, beautiful music also depends. Some want hard rock, some want soft music, some want Carnatic, Shastrik, etc., Shastriya Sangeet, etc., etc., right? But each of us have our own ways of trying to satisfy our ear. Food, right? Everybody wants to have different types of food. Nowadays, people want to have different type of food every day, right? If it is the same rasam, chapati, this, that, and all the people say, oh, so boring. Let's take a break. Let's get a break, right? So we are so actively engaged. Just think about it, right? Every moment of our day, every moment of the night, all the time, we are just trying to gratify these senses, isn't it? Yeah. So all the time we are just involved, totally absorbed in gratifying our senses, right? So this is like the driver all the time, without break, trying to just not follow the orders of his owner, right? Now, what does this mean? So does this mean that we are doing right thing by doing this? Or do you see anything wrong here? In this, Rishikesha, Krishna is the owner of the senses, and we are using the senses in the way we want without actually bothering about what Krishna wants or how Krishna wants to use them. Any questions, any thoughts here? Because this is a very important concept. Actually, this is a central concept of yoga. Okay, yoga means Indriya Samyama. Indriya Samyama. What does that mean? Samyama means control. Control of the senses. There are different paths of yoga. There is Karma Yoga, there is Gnana Yoga, then there is Ashtanga Yoga or Dhyana Yoga, then there is Bhakti Yoga. Okay, all processes of yoga have their own ways to control the mind, and the senses. Mind is considered as the chief sense, right? Head of all the senses. So, but the whole point is that yoga actually is, the whole endeavor is to control the senses. Why control? Because the senses are acting whimsically. They want to do whatever they want without worrying about what their owner wants or how the owner wants to use them. Is it clear? I'm just waiting to hear anything from, few of our new devotees who are on this group who might not have heard much about this, in the past, or it's a very alien concept of controlling senses, because It's completely opposite to the nature of the material world, where the whole focus is to indulge the senses. You know, we use this word indulge. Indulge means just give it whatever it is, whatever it takes. Doesn't matter whether right, wrong, no right or wrong. Just, this was nice. You know, I had this was nice. I went there, it was nice. I enjoyed it. Right now, we should not come under the misunderstanding saying that, you know, we are saying, okay, no happiness, because I started this whole thing saying that happiness, we are looking for happiness. But there is a way to get that happiness, which is not known to most people of this material world. Okay. So normally known approach is gratify your senses, you become happy. Right. But we should understand saying that this happiness is so short-lived. Right, suppose say we eat something nice, you know, maybe it might last for some few hours, maybe a day, but that's it. Next day again you have to endeavor again, you know, maybe the same dish, some other dish, something else to gratify your senses, right? And there's so much of endeavor and the result is so small or so temporary. We are looking for happiness which is not affected by all this. You know, and there's another point which is very important. Please meditate on this, you know, and some of these points you should make a note. Again, I'm saying, you know, happiness is something which is most required for us. All of us, you know, are crazy. We want to always have happiness. Now, most of the times, of course, there might be people who might not agree to this, but most of the times, happiness is not in our control. Happiness is in the control of the situation from which we are expecting to become happy. So for example, right, and I remember, you know, myself and my wife, we did this before marriage. Every weekend we used to go out for eating, and you know, we used to say, okay, let's go this cuisine. You know, today it is continental, next week it is Chinese, next week it is something else. And we were just, you know, going around hunting. We didn't know what we were doing then. Before we came into Krishna consciousness, fortunately we figured that we were trying to find happiness, permanent happiness. But every time we go and we say, okay, this dish, and then we eat and say, oh, this is not up to the expectation. It's not making us happy. Right? Why? So our happiness is now dependent on how the dish was. Right? So our happiness, which is the most valuable thing for us, is not in our control. It's such a helpless situation. Right? It is either controlled by situations, by people, by circumstances, by everything else. Our mood, sometimes everything will be okay, but we go crazy. It is, oh, no, something comes into our mind, kida, and then we are gone. Isn't it? Anybody wants to say anything here? It's very important, right? Because this whole concept of trying to, you know, enjoy the senses, right? It's not going to give us what we are looking for. And that's the whole idea, right? We should understand, see, great rishis and munis, they didn't go through so much of difficulty for nothing. They were super intelligent people, more intelligent than, you know, most of the people of the modern times. They look at all these rishi munis and say, why these people are struggling so much? See, look at us, you know, we're happy and enjoying. Yeah, they were more intelligent, right? They also were looking for happiness, but happiness beyond what normal material people can even imagine to obtain, right? So extremely intelligent people. So the process of bhakti yoga is also like that, right? By the process of bhakti, one can experience happiness which is unparalleled. We wouldn't have experienced something like that in the material world, right? So any thoughts on this process of what is called a sense enjoyment, and how yoga is talking about indriya samyama, control of the senses? Any thoughts? Or you know, you don't agree to something, or you want to make a point or a comment? Anybody?
Hi, I wanted to ask, so basically, yoga talks about this. So is it that when we meditate or do pranayam and basically yoga, all these things automatically come into control, like we feel very contented?
Okay. So yoga, like I said, you know, there are many different paths that can be followed. So what, Supriya, you're talking about is what is called as Ashtanga yoga. Okay. So in Ashtanga yoga, there are 8 stages or 8 different paths: yama, niyama, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, Like this, there are eight stages you can call. Okay, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama. Now, what is actually the whole aim of Ashtanga Yoga was not to just do these asanas and dhyana and meditation and some postures, sitting postures, standing postures, and some breathing exercise. This was not the aim of Ashtanga Yoga. The aim of Ashtanga Yoga, these were actually stepping stones to take us to a final stage, which is called as samadhi. Samadhi means where you are completely in union with the Lord, like completely connected. Like yoga also means connection, right? Connecting to the Lord. So these were just stepping, like it's like basic warm-up exercises, you can call it, right? So these were things that used to be done to basically bring the control, mind under control. But these are very preliminary processes. Like you will not experience the full effect of mind control by just doing meditation and asana and pranayama. Very, very elementary, preliminary, right? But unfortunately, in Kali Yuga, it's very difficult to go beyond. Actually, in yoga, there is pratyahara, right? Actually, this pratyahara is, there are lots of do's and don'ts, which used to be followed previously for the yoga practice to become actually beneficial or successful. But today, you go to any yoga class, nobody says, don't do this, don't do that, change your lifestyle. Very few, as in real authentic teachers of Patanjali Yoga, they follow this, right? But generally it's like, physical exercise, just come during that time, do. Otherwise, rest of the day, you do whatever you want. You're smoking, you smoke. You're drinking, you drink. You're eating unhealthy food, you do. You're sleeping, unearthly hours. No objection or no recommendation. Now, you can't do all this without lifestyle change. That is why I said, when I started Bhakti Yoga or any yoga for that matter, is actually a transformational exercise. But since the science has completely lost, right? So people actually are taking up these paths incompletely. So they're not able to actually experience the eventual result. Yes, Ashtanga Yoga, if done, will take us to Samadhi. Samadhi is a state of complete bliss, right? Like that bliss which is not from outside, right? And it's a spiritual state, right? But it's one of the, of course, complete perfection will take you to the transcendence, but there are again various stages in this paths, right? So yes, it is intended, but just not the asana, dhyana, meditation and all these will not give us the what I am talking about. What I am talking about is something which has to be done very seriously, then you will experience it, right? It is sadhana.
Okay.
Actually, we call this sadhana. Sadhana means actually endeavor, right? Regular practice. It's like, like Sachin Tendulkar, how did he become the great batsman he was? It's not like just one day he came onto the field and started batting, right? I mean, years and years of rigorous practice and discipline and everything, right? I mean, how much sports person, they're so concerned about their diet, what they do, etc. Coach is behind them or personal trainer is behind them all the time. Why? Because otherwise they can't achieve the kind of feats that they've achieved, right? So, and yoga is not different, right? If you want to achieve the pinnacles of yoga, then you have to follow the process perfectly, right? Is that okay? That answered your question, Supriya?
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay, anybody has anything else? I think I heard there's one comment saying is Kriya Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. Yes, Ashtanga Yoga also has various variations. Technically, I don't know, but I think yes, Kriya Yoga is a part of Ashtanga Yoga. Technically, how different they are, I don't know, right? But yes, it is part of Ashtanga Yoga. Anything else? Anybody else has any questions? So the whole thought process is about this whole process about, and one more thing, right? If I ask people, how many of us want to control our mind? How many of us will say yes? I want to control my mind. I want to make sure that okay. Or the other way of putting it, how many of you agree that your mind misbehaves?
Agree.
Agree. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Madhurya Mataji, hand up. Rohit Prabhu, yes. Supriya Mataji, hand
Yes.
up. Yes. Okay. So
Yes, sir.
yes, so all of us, I mean, others who are not responding, I'm assuming that all of you also agree saying that, thank you, Gaurav Prabhu. So all of you all agree saying that the mind, you want to control the mind misbehaves, right? Sometimes, we just become angry at somebody, we get upset and then, we are distressed and so much of, irritation and this and that and so many negative emotions. right? Now, if so, everybody wants to control the mind. Now, if I say that mind control is not a, like I said, it's not a single, single pronged approach, right? You can't. First of all, we need to understand what the mind is. Okay, so today's class goes. So I got into this. This is a very interesting topic. How many of us know where is the mind? Anybody knows where is the mind? Okay, some discussion here will be nice if some of you can contribute. Where
within our body.
in the body. Okay, that's the safest answer. Okay, it's in the body. Of course, it's in the body. Yeah. Okay, Supriya Mataji is saying it's in the brain. Okay, how many of us think it's in the brain?
Sir, in the heart, sir.
In the heart. Okay, Meena Mataji is saying in the heart. Okay. Any other question? Any other thoughts? Brain, heart. Not in the leg. Okay, brain or heart. Okay, now why brain, why heart? And what is the mind? What does the mind do, by the way? What is the role of mind? Why is it troubling us so much? I am preempting a future topic actually because of Rishikesha.
It's nature, sir. It keeps wandering, sir.
Okay, what is the job of mind? Why do we have mind? Can we just remove the mind?
It's
No, Supriya can speak because mind has no direction. Okay, so mind has no. Okay, mind has no direction. Yes, but I'm asking, what is the role of mind? What is it supposed to do?
Hare Krishna.
We'll take 2 minutes and just see if we can get somewhere. Otherwise, then I'll.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
control senses, Prabhu.
No,
Hare Krishna.
Mike, 1 second, Prabhu. I'm saying, what is the role of mind? Yes, Prabhu, tell me.
Yeah. See, there is no separate organ like a mind in our body. There is no organ in our body. Mind is only what we are thinking and accordingly what we are doing.
Okay. Fine.
Yeah. My thought is telling like that only.
Okay. Fine.
If there is a separate organ in the mind, if anything wrong with the mind, we can go to the doctor and he will correct it.
No, but then where will he give medicine for? For what will he give medicine?
Medicine
It is
we will
not an
get
organ.
And only by prayers and praying to God.
No, but my sister is here on this call. She's a psychologist, right?
Yeah.
She treats people with mind problems.
Yeah, you can.
So if the mind is not an organ, then what are they treating? And if I let her speak, then our whole class will be hijacked to a psychology class. Okay, so basically, mind has 3 functions. Okay, mind has functions of thinking, feeling, and willing. Okay, I'm repeating it: thinking, feeling, and willing. Okay, mind is actually present is in the heart. Okay, as in that is the region of the heart where we say that there is mind. It's not in the brain. So thinking, feeling, willing, in very simply put, actually the mind's job is to accept and reject. Okay, mind's job is to accept and reject. Mind is different from intelligence. Okay, so Krishna subsequently in Bhagavad Gita talks about mind, intelligence, and false ego. Mano buddhi revacha, right? Man, and then there is buddhi, and then there is ahankar. Okay, so the mind actually doesn't have knowledge. Okay, because intelligence consumes knowledge. Intelligence, when we read, we consume knowledge, right? We process that knowledge. That is called intelligence. Now, intelligence technically is supposed to feed the mind. Intelligence is supposed to tell the mind this is wrong, this is right. Okay, intelligence is actually at a higher level. It is superior to the mind, but the mind is so misbehaving. Mind overrules the intelligence, and in its process of accepting and rejecting, it will just do things whimsically without basis. Okay, so that is why this mind is extremely dangerous. It is the, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, it can be your friend, but it is your worst enemy. Okay, so we are living with our worst enemy. So please don't look at somebody and say, this person is an enemy, this person I don't like. We keep doing this. We are always, our finger is outward. No mistake from my side. No. Mistake is always on the other side. Please remember, we are all living with our greatest enemy, this mind. This mind is the master of the senses. So the mind says, eat this, then the senses will respond. The mind says, speak like this, the senses will respond. And what is expected to do, we will discuss in the second chapter. There's a process which has to be broken. There is a, super fast, like a microsecond or, faster than that kind of process that happens from the time some thought comes into our mind and we react. Okay, and we can cut that process. And that is the power of yoga. Okay, so yoga can actually bring us in control of our mind. Okay, so, and you cannot control the mind if you don't restrict the activities of the senses. Please remember this. So those who were all saying that I want to control my mind, you cannot control your mind if you don't control your senses. So it is like those horses. If you don't control the horses will run whatever direction they want to, right? If there are 5 horses, they can run in 5 different directions, which is what happens to our senses, right? 5 senses, they go in all directions. If we don't impose some kind of constraints, and we'll also talk about whether it is possible, not possible in future sessions, right? But the whole point is senses have to be controlled, and then mind can be brought under control. If senses are not controlled, mind cannot be brought under control. Okay, and then of course, Bhakti Yoga has a very beautiful process of very easily controlling the mind now, which is a secret which we'll discuss later. Okay, so the point here is Rishikesha, he is the owner of the senses. Please remember, Krishna is the owner of our senses. We have to we have to use our senses in the way he wants us to use. And we'll understand this from the pages of Bhagavad Gita. Today, how are we living? We are living our life the way we want. We are enjoying our senses the way we want to enjoy. We are not bothered about any owner, any direction, control. We don't care. We just say, I don't care. It's my way or the highway, right? But unfortunately, Bhagavad Gita is not saying that, right? It is Rishikesha. He is the owner. We have to understand his control and we have to actually abide by his orders. This is the whole process of yoga, okay? To engage the senses in the work that it is supposed to be engaged in, and not just in the way whimsically we are actually utilizing them today. Okay, so that was one part here, Rishikesha. Then, by the way, just one kind of side note, very powerful spiritualists, I mean, even Bhakti yogis or Ashtanga yogis, actually, they don't need sleep at all. They have so much spiritual strength that they don't even require sleeping or eating or any of the normal requirements that our senses have. They don't need at all. So which means that this is purely a very low class kind of engagement that we are putting our senses in, right? There's a high class engagement which, when done, actually all these low class engagements completely becomes not required. And still the goal being happiness. The goal is happiness. You can either engage in low class engagement or you can engage in high class engagement, right? That's the whole point. Okay. So like I said, and interestingly, the Lord controls the senses of his pure devotee. A pure devotee is one who has no other desire in his life but to serve the Lord the way he wants to be served. He's called a pure devotee, right? And for a pure devotee senses are completely controlled by the Lord. Actually, they will only do things the way Lord wants, right? And all of us in this material world, we're called conditioned souls. We are conditioned. We are conditioned by what? By the sense of wanting to enjoy independent of the orders of Krishna. That's how we are conditioned. We are conditioned by our thoughts, by our, lifestyle, etc., various things. We are conditioned, which means that, many people say, no, this is how I am. This is my nature. I can't change it. This is called conditioning. But a pure devotee, he doesn't care. He says, no, my conditioning, all that nonsense, just drop it, right? Like I will do whatever the Lord desires. He's a pure devotee, right? And of course, initially he might fail, but over a period of time with the consistent practice, he actually succeeds. So the Lord directly controls.
Just one question. So
Yes.
the definition of pure devotee, does it mean that somebody who has taken sannyasa?
No. No,
or
okay.
in
Good question.
any of the varnashrams, right? So if people are in any other stage of life also.
Yeah. So see, okay, so Varna, just so that you know, it's a very interesting question. So like I don't know if I mentioned in the past. So Varna, there are 4 Varnas and 4 ashramas. The idea of ashramas is a person, especially in Kali Yuga, he's supposed to live for 100 years, though we hardly, with great struggle, we might reach there. But 100 years is split into 4 ashramas. Okay, the first 25 years is called brahmacharya, then there is grihastha, then there is vanaprastha, and then there is sannyas. Now, a pure devotee can be in any of the ashramas. There is no restriction saying that a pure devotee has to be only a sannyasi. Okay, which is why I see this process of bhakti yoga. This is so interesting. Actually, bhakti yoga is available to anybody, irrespective of whatever ashrama they are in. Right? And in fact, you know, our Srila Prabhupada, who was our founder Acharya of ISKCON, he was a grihastha, he was a married man, right? Then his guru was a brahmachari, he was a sannyasi. His father was a grihastha, right? They are our acharyas. So Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was Srila Prabhupada's guru, he was a sannyasi. And then his father was Bhakti Vinod Thakur, who was a grihastha. So like this, in our sampradaya, actually there are great devotees who are not sannyasis, who are grihasthas. Right? And of course, then this is 25 years. So this is also very important, right? So brahmacharya is 25 years, grihastha is 25 years. So we're expected to marry around 25 years, but nowadays people marry at 35, right? Or whatever, right? 25, then 50. 50 you are expected to be done with your grihastha responsibilities, which means that my responsibility of my home, my children, their education, this, that, all that. In 25 years, you should be done, right? And then vanaprastha. Vanaprastha means that basically your 8 hours of work that you are supposed to do should be stopped, technically, right? And we'll talk about all this, right? Nothing whimsical or you know, without proper thought process. We'll discuss all this, right? But the idea is that from then on, from 50 years, you should be focused more on actually trying to achieve the goal of life. Now, previously when people were in brahmacharya, of course this was knowledge that each and every, you know, everybody used to know, saying that the goal of life is to achieve Vishnu, right? So when they came at 50, people were very clear. Okay, now I know the goal. Now all these days I was engaged with other activities. Now I'm going to focus completely, right? And then of course sannyas is for those who want to completely separate out from the society and, you know, focus. Now they can all, that's also possible, right? But it is not restricting any person in any ashrama to achieve this stage of pure devotion. Okay, but the most important part of the definition is no desires independent of the Lord. No desires for my own happiness. No desires for, you know, what I want to do or how I want to live, or everything is just aligned to what the Lord wants. How can I serve him? All right, and trying to follow authorized, you know, processes given by acharyas to just engage life completely in that path. That is pure devotional service. And for such people, and pure devotional service also, actually Srila Prabhupada created ISKCON and he called it as the Institute for Pure Devotion. Okay, now which means it's like, you know, anybody who takes an admission in some sense, right? If you get introduced to ISKCON, if you are trying to practice process of ISKCON, we should be a pure devotee. That just that, you know, a pure devotee also, there are different standards, right? So we might be KG1 pure devotee, and then there is a PhD pure devotee, right? But everybody is a pure devotee, which means technically all of us are trying to practice this, saying that how can I become, so desirelessness. Now, this is another very important concept. People think that, you know, like for example, some people say, meditate on light. Okay, don't think about anything. Has anybody tried this? Meditate on some object and don't think about anything. I mean, that whole process of meditating on that object itself is thinking about that object, right? How can you not think of anything? And they can say, okay, don't think about anything else, but that's still an object, right? So this is actually this whole process, you know, that there are so many processes, which is, I mean, that's will not take us to the goal, right? Especially in this Kali Yuga. So, you know, we should understand this pure devotion is very easily available, very, very easily available, provided we want it. Provided we want it. See, just like this whole material world is running on material desires, the whole spiritual world, the whole spiritual realm runs on spiritual desires. And that person who has no material desires of, I want to become this, I want to become that, I want to, you know, become a rich man, I want to become and why are we wanting to do all this? Just to get happiness, right? And if you go and ask that person, okay, sir, you are the prime minister of the country, how happy you are? Ore baba, where do I have time for happiness? Every moment there are hundreds of problems that I have to deal with, this, that, etc. Right? People who have too much of money, they are worried because most people don't have made it in the right way. So some IT raid, okay, how do I, this person has to be bribed, that person, new person came to that post, now I don't have a good relation with him, this new contract has come, somebody else is going to take it. I mean, there is no peace of mind, there's no happiness. So after all that struggle, we end up in something which is not going to give us what we set out to. And of course, in the en route, we actually forget what we are looking for. We just think that the path itself is the goal. I'm again repeating that. We think that the path itself is the goal. We forget the goal. We think that the journey itself is the goal. Many people say this, journey is itself the goal. Journey is not the goal. Journey is journey. That is why the word is called journey, right? Journey is to take us from one place to another place. We have to be clear what that place is, and we have to use the journey. We have to plan the journey such that it can take us from where we are to that destination, right? So this is the beauty of pure devotional service. It can be done by anybody, and it's just about knowing whose desires. So it's not about desirelessness. It is about being full of desires to serve the Lord. These are called spiritual desires. So having spiritual desires is also desirelessness, because it is not on the material platform. Okay, and just 2 minutes, I'll conclude. In this verse, Srila Prabhupada also writes about various names that Krishna has. So this is very beautiful, actually. Krishna has so many names. All the names, different names are given by different devotees to Krishna based on the various Leela pastimes, based on the various activities of the Lord. So for example, Lord is called Madhusudana because he killed a demon called Madhu. Then he's called Govinda. This is very, we go to Tirupati and say Govinda, Govinda. So Govinda means actually one who gives pleasure to the senses and cows. Govinda gives pleasure to senses. Now, pleasure to senses means when we serve Govinda, our senses also become pleasurable, become happy. That is what Govinda means, right? So we go to Govinda and say, give me Gobi Manchurian. Now that's not going to give us happiness. You go to Govinda and say, Govinda, can I serve you? Then we get happiness, right? That is Govinda, right? Then Vasudeva, because he was son of Vasudeva, and so on, right? So Yashoda Nandana, beautiful, darling son of Yashoda, Nanda Nandana, son of Nanda Maharaj, and so on, right? So Rishikesha, he is the one who is giving direction. Rishikesha also, because he is the controller, he has to give direction. So Rishikesha, Krishna is now going to start giving directions to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Okay, and of course, Arjuna, Bhima is also mentioned, saying Bhima Karma Vrukodaraha. It is said that Bhima could do unparalleled tasks, tasks which are most difficult for most people. And he also used to eat voraciously. It's called voracious eater. I mean, the amount of food that he could eat, nobody could. And at the same time, the kind of work that he could do, nobody else could do. Right? So he also blew his conch shell called Poundra. So Krishna, Arjuna, and Bhima's conch shells are being spoken about, and the significance of Rishikesha. That was the central theme of today. So please remember, next week, hopefully somebody will, when you say what did we discuss last week, somebody should recollect and talk about it. So we talked mainly about two topics today. One is we talked about how there's transcendental world, spiritual world, and then material world. Material world is a quarter of the Lord's creation. This is likened to a jail. We are all inmates here. Our goal is to get out of the jail, but we are so happy with the jail that we are just sitting here and comparing with each other in terms of our different dress and different situations that we are in, not thinking about why we are here and is there a way to get out. Right, that's the first part. And the second part is about Rishikesha, about yoga being Indriya Samyama, that we have to control the senses, we have to control the mind. This is the whole intention of yoga. And pure devotee is one who actually, just lives for the pleasure of the Lord. Okay, so these were the central concepts discussed today. Anybody has any questions?
So mind is in the brain, right?
Mind is in the heart.
Heart. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I've still not talked about chanting. I am going to at the right time. But please understand, whatever I spoke about, the whole process of controlling the mind is not possible by our own endeavor. I told this before in the first session itself. It's a transformational process. We need some external strength, external, support, external help for us to be actually able to do this. So we follow the process of Bhakti Yoga, which is ABCD. A for association. The kind of people we associate with, we become that. If we associate with thieves and robbers, we become thieves and robbers. If we associate with sadhus, we become sadhus. Right? Of course, the question is, why should we become sadhus? And that's the whole discussion about Bhagavad Gita. Now, B is books. Please read Bhagavad Gita. I sent the link last time. Prabhu shared the link last time. Please read Bhagavad Gita every day. If somebody of you have already started, it is very good. If you've not started, again, request you to please spend some time. Maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever works for you. Just, open maybe 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. Just let the knowledge keep flowing, right? Because it will keep working at some subconscious level. C is chanting the holy names of the Lord, because only by the process of chanting the holy names of the Lord, all this, what we call as anartha, right, unwanted things in the heart, mind will go off, right? And that's when we become pure, and that's when we control the mind and then go beyond that, right? So that's the process of chanting. So I have a video on chanting which I will share on the group, but we will talk about chanting subsequently. But we should chant every day. All these things have to be done technically every day. A, B, C, D is diet. So we're going to talk about that as well soon. The kind of food we eat influences our consciousness. If we eat food offered to Krishna, then it doesn't have any material contamination and it helps us to become pure. Right, so these are the ABCD, we call it of spiritual life of bhakti, life of bhakti. Please practice it every day. And if you are finding this useful, like I said, our whole idea is to reach this message to more and more people. So request you to please invite friends and family, whomever. It's a process of it's about sharing the goodwill about something good that we are getting. So I request all of you to please spread the word around so that we can have more people joining us and more people getting benefited by the untimely wisdom of Bhagavad Gita. Okay, any thoughts, points? Otherwise we can end here.